From loose bolts to faulty wiring, these are the 5 most shocking crashes that prove aircraft maintenance saves lives. But when it goes wrong, disaster strikes. Number 1. Alaska Airlines Flight 261. On this episode of Mayday, we heard about this tragic accident before, so we knew it was coming. But for those who don't know, in 1985, an Alaska Airlines Boeing 737 was flying from Anchorage to Washington State. Shortly after takeoff, the pilots began to notice smoke in the cockpit. They turned on the cabin's overheat warning light and prepared to make an emergency landing. As the plane lost altitude, the pilots fought to keep the jet under control. But at 10,000 feet, the pilots lost all hydraulic power. They put out a distress call. The closest airport was just 30 miles away. The pilots had made it this far, but now they were fighting for every foot. With the airport in sight, the pilots fought to maintain control as the damaged 737 touched down short of the runway. The jet then veered off the runway, slid down an embankment, and hit a tree. It split the plane in half, and sadly, all 86 people on board were killed. The cause of the crash, a jack screw in the horizontal stabilizer, had failed. Now, jack screws are very important because they allow the pilots to adjust the trim of the aircraft while in flight. And the jack screw on this 737 had a history of problems. It had been replaced several times, but during the last replacement, the new screw had not been properly lubricated. This caused the screw to seize up, which led to the complete failure of the horizontal stabilizer. In short, this crash could have been avoided if only someone had taken the time to properly lubricate a jack screw. Number 2. Iran Air Airbus A300. In 1988, an Airbus A300 was approaching Tehran International Airport when suddenly the pilots lost all hydraulic fluid. Now, since there was no way to control the aircraft, the pilots put out a distress call and tried to find a safe place to land. But before they could land, the plane crashed into a mountain. All 290 people on board were killed. Now, the reason for this crash was down to some very bad maintenance. See, a few months earlier, the same plane had experienced some very similar problems. And on that occasion, a bolt that secured a rudder had come loose. The bolt in question should have been checked during the maintenance, but it wasn't. And that oversight would eventually lead to the premature failure of the rudder, which in turn led to the loss of control. Number 3. Air Canada DC-9. In 1963, an Air Canada DC-9 was on its way from Montreal to Ottawa when the pilots noticed smoke in the cockpit. As the plane approached Ottawa, the pilots prepared to make an emergency landing. But shortly after, the pilots lost control of the plane and it crashed. An investigation would later reveal that a ground crew had accidentally disconnected a wire that was supposed to be connected to the autopilot system. That mistake had very nearly caused a catastrophic accident. Number 4. Japan Airlines 747. In 1979, a Japan Airlines 747 was on approach to Tokyo when the pilots noticed smoke in the cockpit. They immediately put out a distress call and diverted to another airport. But as they were doing so, the pilots lost control of the plane and it crashed into a mountain. All 178 people on board were killed. Now, the 747 had a history of overheating, so the pilots were already on edge when they noticed the smoke. What they didn't know was that someone had improperly installed a wiring harness in the cargo hold. That harness should have prevented the plane from overheating, but instead, it caused a fire that spread throughout the plane. By the time the pilots realized what was happening, it was too late. And number 5, Delta Airlines MD-88. In 1991, a Delta Airlines MD-88 was on its way from Florida to Pennsylvania when the pilots noticed smoke in the cockpit. Now, smoke in the cockpit is a serious issue, so the pilots did the right thing. They turned around and headed back to Florida. But as they were doing so, the pilots lost all hydraulic power and they crash-landed in the Everglades. Thankfully, all 10 people on board survived. But the crash was still the most expensive in Delta's history. Now, the reason for the crash was down to a broken wire. You see, there was a wire in the hydraulic system that had been crimped incorrectly. Now, that wire was supposed to be inspected during maintenance, but it wasn't. And the next thing you know, the wire snaps and the plane loses all hydraulic power. What's your scariest aviation disaster? Let me know in the comments below.